All right. What's up, everyone? Welcome to Late Nite Art Live. I'm Adam Rosendahl. I'm the founder and CEO of Late Nite Art, and we help leaders and teams build trust and connection and collaboration through arts-based immersive experiences. I'm super excited to have both of you here, two brilliant minds who I really respect. Ivy Ross, who's the head of design for hardware products at Google. Welcome, Ivy.
Great to be here. Where's your hat? I missed that hat.
It's hard to wear a hat when you're wearing these big headphones, right? So
okay, I have a good sense of imagination. I'm going to put that hat on your head.
All right, cool. And then Susan, so happy to have you here. Susan Magsamen, the executive director of the International Arts and Mind Lab at Johns Hopkins University, and so many other things. Welcome, Susan.
Great to be here. Thanks for having us. We have great minds and great hearts. I just want to say
exactly. That is so true. Yeah, I feel that way about both of you. And yeah, there's too much emphasis on the mind in general. So I was just describing to you both that I feel like you've made my life so much easier because I have been an artist my whole life. And I really believe that the arts are part of the missing key to our health and well-being and towards connection at work. But it's been a long journey for me. But your book, Your Brain on Art, has given me the science, which I can just hold up and kind of point to any doubt and skepticism. It really is very helpful. So for the last 10 years, I've been using art to help teams and leaders connect in really powerful ways. And I've never seen a book or a research paper or any kind of magazine that has just so clearly stated how the arts impact our health and our work and our world. So thank you for writing this, and really glad that you're here. And we are also here with Andy Garcia, who is joining us from Caracas, Venezuela, and working behind the scenes to make this run smoothly. So welcome, Andy. So everyone who's tuning in from around the globe, just wondering if you could drop in the chat, what city are you calling in from? So just curious to see where people are at. I'm currently in Madrid. I'm in my friend Nir's studio here. And something that I've been hearing a lot recently, though, is that people are talking about that the old ways of building connection at work are just not working anymore. And, obviously the workplace has shifted so much. And something I've been saying is that disconnection is the disease and creativity is the cure. And so in my experience, art and creativity is a very not utilized enough tool that we have to address disconnection. And that's why I feel like this conversation right now feels really important and really timely. And I'm just excited to rethink the role that art has in work and in the workplace. So Susan, I'm just curious if we could start with you. All right, here we got some people joining in from Oakland. Casey, what's going on? We have people joining in from Portland and Boston. Hello, Karen. Love it. Vallejo. Nice. The Netherlands. Welcome. So Susan, if you could kick it off just with a little bit of the science portion, like what has some of the research shown around how you see art and how it helps form connection?
Wow. Well, we are sentient beings, right? We bring the world in through our senses. And I think somewhere along the way, we forgot that, right? Ivy and I use this quote by Jill Bolte Taylor that says, most of us think of ourselves as thinking creatures that feel, but we're actually feeling creatures that think. And when you really think about that, we've sort of cut off these amazing ways to bring the world in, and they impact us in such profound ways. And so, you're born with 100 billion neurons, and they connect through synaptic connections that create neural pathways. But the only way that those synaptic connections happen is through these multisensory experiences. And when you put them together, light, sound, smell, temperature, touch, that is usually what we create in terms of creative expression, which for us equals art. Right. And so it's the most powerful way we experience the world. And it forms the way we think, the way we feel, the way we move, the way we remember. And so, the arts are kind of a highbrow term in some ways. I think they've separated us. But it's really about how we bring the world in and how do we translate it and put it out in terms of creative expression. And I think that somewhere along the way, we forgot that we are human, that we flesh and blood. And, so we know now about sleep. We now know about nutrition. We now know about exercise. And I think the human development pillar that has been missing is these arts and aesthetic experiences. And so when we did the book research and we started to just back map, what do we know about mental health and the arts? What do we know about physical health and these arts experiences? We're really able to unearth a tremendous amount of research in multiple fields. And it's, as you said, it's happening more frequently. There's more research. The momentum is growing. So I think what we have heard about the book is that it validated what people already knew, certainly what artists already knew. And beautifully, it has given people permission to both make and behold art because it's good for us. And I think that's a win.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I'm just curious if maybe you could jump to you, Ivy, around like how you use art specifically with your own team to build trust or connection, if there's a real world example that you want to put in the mix.
Yeah. So I do many projects to take them out of what we do on a daily basis, which is design hardware. And so one of them I'll describe was with an artist, Kyle Johnson, who makes things out of cardboard. And what we did, it's like having, instead of office hours where they come talk to me, it was like art hours. And we set him up in the atrium and he did a huge cardboard globe. And we had all these materials, like it was like being in a kindergarten class, markers and felt, and just like being in kindergarten, and tools. And you signed up for a 3-hour slot to come down during the 3 days he was there. And first of all, the beautiful thing is I have a couple of hundred people that work for me. And so people would occupy, this big table, some of which they work in the same division, but they've never sat next to each other. And while there, the assignment was to claim a part of the globe and make a world in which you want to live. Like, what would that feel like and look like with all these materials? But the process, when you get in that flow state, you get out of the cognitive mind and you're in that creative flow state. What's beautiful is people, as they're working with both hands, would start to chat with the person next to them. Oh, what are you making? Well, why are you making that? And these deep connections around not the transactional things that we do every day in our job, but bigger life discussions just start to flow, no pun intended, when you're in this flow state. And the great thing is at the end of the 3-day period, the globe was entirely filled with different, if you were to zoom in, beautiful expressions of the way each of these people wanted to live. And then we had an opening that evening, and instead of an art exhibition, you say, which one's the artist? It was, oh my God, we're all the artists. And so we created the world together that we want to live in. But that bonding, giving the brain the time to get out of almost the rational mind and into this creative spirit is such an important muscle we have to exercise. And so, and I believe, and people do, they go back to their jobs in a much a different frame of mind in
Absolutely.
terms of the ability to solve problems or see things from different perspectives. And they made new connections that came from, scribbling next to somebody that will change forever how they work together.
Totally. I'm with you 100% on that. I mean, I think about a lot of people after they see what I'm up to, they think that, are you an organizational art therapist? And I say, no, like I don't have that background, but something about just being in the process of creative expression that changes the tone of how people speak to each other, how they treat each other, like the conversations that are happening deepen, and this is what has been my experience. So, and it really shifts how people work together.
Yeah. Art is a universal language. And so I think once you start to plug into it, you're on a whole different wavelength that is very pure.
Yeah, it's pure and it's accessible and it's universal, which is so important when people are coming from different countries to these offsites or these all staff gatherings, and they're coming from so many different perspectives. And what's the thing that can align everyone? So, Susan, would you share a quick example from your team around how you use the arts?
Yeah, I mean, I love Ivy's term art hours. I think we are all over the country. Our core team's in Baltimore, but we do some kind of art project whenever we get together. We don't have hundreds of people. We have, tens of people, but it's really great to do. The last thing that we did was a glass blowing exercise where we went and worked on creating really like unique pieces of glass. And I think metaphorically, it was about both a technique, but also about how do you take something as simple as sand and melt it and turn it into something beautiful. And so I think the metaphors of art also translate. We've also done, we've had a number of people in our lab that are from different cultures, and creating visual art has been really important, and thinking about like what people are saying when there are no words. So we do a lot of kind of just quick visual types of things to kind of get at problem solving. I think sometimes we don't know consciously what the answer is, but when you start to make, you start to be able to sort of figure that out. So we use art in problem making, problem solving, like with bigger issues around strategy and things like that. We have an offsite coming in soon, and this is a really good one. I'm in Baltimore. Shout out to Baltimore, and we're going to go and we are going to eat steamed crabs together because it's a messy thing, and food is art. And so I think something that I've also learned a lot with our team is that we do potlucks where people bring different things from their own families or their cultures. And it's a way to know somebody without having to explain who you are. And so I love the way that you weave that through all of the ways you come together. We've probably talked about that before, but I come from a family where making and beholding, you just did that, right? So it wasn't like an event. And I think one of my goals is to get back to just living that life, and not, saying, today is the art day. It's like, it's every day that weaves in. And then there's those special big moments where you hit a keynote. I've seen some of the work that Ivy's done with her team, and it's amazing. It's so deep, and it's like resonating experiences. And so marrying those with the kind of day-to-day, they actually have kitchens in their offices at Google. So you can go and hang out and share each other very easily, which is great.
Yeah. Well, I think like what you're saying of, there's the highbrow term art, and it's become kind of divisive of the artists and the non-creatives. And how do we open the door to this to more people, especially inside of business, to use really strategically and not just in like let's do a fun little activity. So I'm such a big believer of this. And I wanted to share really quickly this drawing that I did. Every month I do a drawing of people who I find to be really inspiring in this realm of creativity and human connection. And so I chose the two of you because I think that you're helping reframe this conversation about art, not as let's make things pretty or let's put murals on the wall, but as a tool for real healing and for transforming our workplaces in the world. So I love this quote: art is not a nice to have, but it's a have to have. And Susan, you just shared some real life examples of how you're using this with your team, but why do you think there aren't more companies that are integrating the arts right now? Like, what do you think is part of that barrier?
Well, I'll start by saying that I think when you have leaders who really buy into this construct, this whole philosophy about the way that the arts change us and transform us, it's a lot easier for managers and employees to do it, and to feel like they're going to be rewarded, and they're not going to be ostracized, or that's not seen as a waste of time or a luxury. And so I think leadership is really important. I'll also say that I think that that's beginning to change, but thinking about what is a bottom line, how do you think about what is an ROI? And what we've seen in the work that we've done is that the return on investment in this work is exponential. It changes productivity, it changes innovation, it changes collaboration, it changes health both mental and physical health. And I'm not sure that those messages and data evidence have really been broadly circulated to business. And so I think there's an opportunity there.
Definitely. And we just spoke at a conference, and we put up a slide because the World Economic Forum listed the 12 attributes that leaders for the future are going to need to be great leaders. And then we highlighted that 6 of the 12 attributes you get from involvement in the arts. And by the way, when we say the arts, it's anything that allows for creative expression. In fact, we call gardening the slowest art form, but it is an art form.
That is great. I love that is the slowest art form. Yeah, I think that also becomes a term that can be mishmash and not sure what it means. But like when I talk about art, I often think of creative expression and things that people are creating in the world. And so when I incorporate art into business, I'm usually specifically using visual art, music, creative writing, aspects of theater, storytelling, and movement and dance. Those are
it's great
modalities.
I've been in one of your sessions, and I love the way you integrate that. I mean, you really get the multidimensionality of your drawing, you're listening to music. I mean, we often say when people say, oh, how do you even get started? We're like, well, put on your favorite song and draw what you're hearing. There's all ways to give yourself these prompts for those people that are totally intimidated or fearful of it.
So for the skeptics, because part of it is there are people just so used to doing it the way that they've always done it. And so for the skeptics, like, especially in the leadership category of like CFO, CEO, or people who are like thinking about it, like, what would you tell them around why it's worth their time? I feel like you both just hinted a lot about how it deeply impacts people's health. I remember you saying in the book, I forgot if it was 20 minutes of art making can like improve our life, extend our life, but also just improves our health. But besides that, like any other kind of like, you could just like give people the gems of like, this is why this needs to be incorporated into your work.
Yeah. So one clear example we say is, all of our hands were slapped for doodling in meetings. Well, actually, when you're doodling, it ignites a portion of the brain where you will remember what your boss or someone's saying in that talk by doodling. So I mean, that's like one little gem. Also stress. I mean, it lowers cortisol like within 20 minutes greatly. Things about being able to solve problems because you're seeing things from different perspectives. I mean, there are all these like core check. I often did experiments years ago when I was working at the Gap where I would take a bunch of executives and this was before, science. What's great about science now, which is why we wrote the book, is you can get information without invading people's heads. You put them in MRI machines while they're playing a guitar and you could see what happens in terms of where the brain lights up. But in those days, all I could do is give like an information, have people check off how they were feeling or feeling stuck, did some sound work with them for 20 minutes. They went back to their jobs and then did a post interview. And so many of them were able to, they said, oh my God, there's an employee I've been needing to give feedback to that I've been afraid to do so. But this afternoon, I felt so clear and I was able to do that, or I was able to solve a problem. So I did it by just showing pre and post, And we understand, I think since the Industrial Revolution, we've been optimizing for productivity and efficiency. And companies it's been in this mode of rigor, and no time to imagine in between, and no time to have to daydream and to actually, we take in so much information. What we don't understand is we don't give our employees time to go offline and make connections between the things we've taken in. And that's where you get those aha moments. So the irony for me is companies want innovation, creativity. And what they don't understand is by not giving folks these moments, the space between the notes to make the connections, they're actually not getting the best of their people. They're not getting the innovation for that reason.
I'll even add to that is that there's other like examples about cognitive load, and just journaling what you're feeling will actually give you more cognitive capacity and lower cortisol. There's so many things that we can point to in terms of identity development and character and sort of this creative flow, moving into a creative flow state. That's going to be important for building a business. But not only do we not do it in business, we say, I love that the World Economic Forum came up with this 10, criteria that the arts check the box for at least half of them. We don't do it in high school. We don't do it in middle school. We say no art. If you're, as Ivy said, if you're not good at it, you shouldn't be doing it. We learned that in third grade. We're basically shamed to say, oh, if you're not a great singer, you shouldn't sing. I don't agree with that. And I think it's really important that we're asking for these, rock star creative people, and we don't create training and on-ramps for them in school. Resilience, people talk about, mental cognition, flexibility. You learn that through the arts. You learn to make decisions. You learn to sort of, make a change. Oh, this color doesn't work. Let's try that color, and it's training. These are skills that you can learn, and we don't teach them at all.
And resilience, like something we really need right now is a big one.
Yeah.
I feel like this is something I was so lucky to learn through the art of creative facilitation, using the art in my work with groups, in my work like long back with this group called Partners for Youth Empowerment. But basically every art form that we talked about, it's not about the art. It's not about doing theater. It's not about visual art. Like, I'm hesitant to even use the word draw or dance or theater. Like, I just have people doing these things, and then when we're debriefing them, there's so many metaphors and there's so many connections back to the work and to the life. And just the process of doing that changes, like you said, it just changes the perspective, and it gives people a chance to connect the dots. So I feel like go ahead.
I was just saying the big part is no judgment, right? That's the key.
That's the key.
Go into this with no judgment, because it is, people have written us and said, oh my God, the book gave me permission to make art again. And it was so sad that, I'm glad our book did that, but the people are waiting for permission because, as Susan said, they've been shut down, or whether someone else judged them or they judge themselves. There's this fear. And, right now there's so many, every day we have micro traumas that just build up and build up and build up, and letting it out through these various disciplines is so important for our health, for our well-being, for executive function, for everything. So
totally.
And then not good enough. I'm not good enough, right?
I think this idea of non-judgment is the key, like you just both said. But it's so difficult, I feel like, to actually create that for myself, even though like that is a core part of the work I do with the groups that I work with. So I think like I fully believe in everything that we're saying, and I still think it's really difficult for people to take the first step. And so I'm curious, first of all, I'm just curious for people who are in the audience, if you're willing to think about like a question and just post it in the chat right now. So we'll have a couple questions. But if the two of you are willing to think about like, what is the first step that people can do? Because to like it's not just break the blank page. Like when they're doing it in business, the stakes are higher. And so when someone's leading a drawing activity before their team meeting, or they're getting, even like for me, getting people to stand up and before a Zoom call and to do like a mirroring movement piece where one person is doing like a quick little stretch movement and everyone's following them. I find that to be, after doing this for 3 minutes, people say, I'm more relaxed. I'm more at ease, like all these differences in their behavior. But to get someone to actually do that, like it takes a lot of courage. So,
well, I always find if you do put out some scientific facts first, it's amazing what it does. People receive the information differently, which is why we're thrilled. The book has been received so well, because it gives people that ammunition. It's like it almost primes the soil, by saying, what we're about to do is going to do this to your brain, that to your brain, this to your heart, and people like are, oh, okay, this isn't about doing something fringe or making me look silly. This is actually has a mission. And I find that people take it in differently. But I also think, creativity comes from trust and freedom. And I remember when I first went in the corporate world, CEOs were going, more creative, more innovative. And they didn't understand that it's really some of the softer stuff that makes innovation happen, which is the conditions, creating the conditions under which innovation can grow. And so setting up, to your point, that field of trust, and there's various ways to do it. It depends on the leader and the circumstance. But that plus a little bit of science, I think, is the right recipe to at least get people to be fearless and like, why not? Let's give it a shot.
Yeah.
I mean, I think
Susan, oh yeah, go ahead, Susan.
I think the absence, safety, when Ivy talks about trust, I think about safety and what are the conditions for feeling safe? And so the first condition for feeling safe is that you don't feel threatened, right? And in a corporate environment, you can understand threats might not be physical threat, but they might be, threat of, being embarrassed, or threat of, someone making fun of you, but the other thing about safety is you feeling like you can share yourself. And so I do think Ivy's right, this idea of having a manager or leader, facilitator that helps and can secure safety, that you can't do it without that. And sometimes that's going off site, going outside, not being in your normal conditions. The other thing I think is storytelling. Ivy and I really started our relationship by asking a group of people, researchers, funders, and artists who came together at Ivy's home, one question. And it was, have the arts ever impacted you in any way? Have they ever affected your life in any way? And I went first and I told a story. Ivy told a story. So we were vulnerable. We shared ourselves. And I don't know what, Ivy, 3 hours later, people were still telling unbelievable transformative stories about their lives. And they realized that this work was important, had already been important to them. And I think what we're doing right here is also really important. Like, this is live. It's not scripted. It's an improv. And
sure.
So,
yeah.
And we feel safe with each other to be able to say stuff that comes from within. And so improv is, we're improving all the time, right? If you're really living your life, you're not just,
Totally.
waiting to,
Yeah.
I see we only have like 2 minutes. I wanted to get one question in here. Michael, who said, I love this.
Hi, Michael.
A lot of huge companies have these huge art collections that get completely ignored because it's not in the right place to view art. How could a company think about incorporating their art collection into their culture instead of just being aesthetic decoration?
Well, you guys probably don't know Michael, but Michael knows this answer. Michael's a brilliant guy. I know Michael.
It's a leading question.
It's good to see you. These are artifacts that have stories. These are artifacts that have a life. And I think a lot of companies and museums are now using their collections for all kinds of things to stimulate conversation around diversity, around equity, around women's health, around the role of, neurodivergent communities in workplace. And so objects have energy and they have power. And so framing them in a new way at corporations or wherever those collections are showing up, and of course, you guys probably know visual teaching strategies, which is a way to use a piece of art to learn about each other. Just taking a single piece of art and asking the simple question, what do you see? What else do you see? What else do you see? And as Ivy said, without judgment.
Yep, that's what I was going to suggest. I think, and Michael's absolutely right. The boardrooms are lined with it, but you never, and it's very untouchable, but bring a group of people up there and do that visual learning strategy where you all look at an abstract painting and feel safe enough to say, what do you see? And then what do you see? And now what do you see? And
Absolutely.
It'll do the same thing that I described, sitting next to someone in that flow state where you get to know someone on a much deeper level.
Yeah. So I know this is, I think we're landing the plane here. I wanted to throw this up here too. Nir Hindi, I'm in his office right now in Madrid, and he was just talking about at Apple, they're having people make breakfast for each other and having just the act of creation as an act of caring. And I love that, creating something for someone, even a small handwritten note with a tiny little doodle on it. When a leader does that, I did that for my team. I did a handwritten drawing of each of my team members, and I presented that to them with a poem. And just like the meaning that has for each person, it's really, really beautiful. But
well, the first time we got together after COVID, I had held a breakfast where everyone had to bring a dish that came from their heart or their grandmother or something from their heritage, and then talk about it and the recipe. And then we made a recipe book and people had to share where it came from. And that immediately brought people together.
Absolutely. So, okay, in 30 seconds or less, like what's the one main takeaway that you would like people to leave with around like what arts has to do with business and why they should care or incorporate it into their work?
Art is business. I mean, it's like there is no business without art.
I couldn't say it any better. It's just, yeah, I mean, art is our business. And I think we should be doing a whole lot more of it. And the return on investment is really unlimited.
It's a human birthright. And so right now we're at a time where we need to exercise our imagination as humans more than ever as the machines enter stage right. So it's like, this is our opportunity to step into it and amplify it. And it's what humans do well. So.
And it's what we've always done well, and
Right.
in some ways have forgotten.
From primitive times, we just sang, danced, and made art, and we were happy.
Absolutely. And one of my biggest takeaways from your brand on art was the chapter on flourishing, where you talked about the different characteristics around how do you create environments where humans flourish, not just survive.
Yep.
And how much art is a critical part of that, of course. And so many other things of like rewriting our inner script and being an aesthetic, like the rooms that we're in. But
and curiosity, right? Just being curious. Yeah.
Yes. So we're about to close, and Andy's going to drop a few links in the chat, including the Your Brain on Art book, which is a really cool website that you guys created for your work and for the book. Also the link to the drawing that I did of the two of you, and then also a resource that we have that is going to come out from Late Nite Art around how people can use the arts in their work as a leader with their teams. So thank you so much, Ivy and Susan. Good to see you. Thank you for tuning in.
Thank you for the work you do.
Yeah. And thank you everyone who's joining us here from around the globe. Looking forward to seeing you at the next Late Nite Art Live someday soon. And with that, yeah, please take this as a call for everyone who's on the call to take a risk and be courageous and incorporate the arts, even if it's in a very small way, into your personal ritual or into the work that you have with your team. So it really takes courage, and especially for the leaders in the room, for you to model that for the people that you work with is part of how we make the wave bigger and bigger.
Yay. Thank you.
All right.
Thank you. I have to run. Bye.
Okay. Yeah, I know you got a meeting. Bye, Ivy.